given that you are an artist, and that you all have to do is feel the need to express, or to want to express, whatever that beauty is within you, and then to contrive the means to release the spirit from its prison. That it's up to you to come up with the way of bringing out that inner nature, bringing out that inner spirit, to say something that only you can say. Now, he takes on a very interesting perspective. The strength of this body of poetry lies in its feeling for the generative power at the core of existence. A first-rate Dickey poem breathes the energy of the world and testifies to the poet's capacity for rising out of habitual, half-lived life. You know, to break out of the moment that seems to hypnotize us into seeing only the mundane. It's truly a gift of absolute ignorance to ever experience boredom. And Vivekananda, you know, in his writings, is always trying to get us to become aware of what the Christians like to refer to as the mystery, you know, this mystery that surrounds us. The fact that actually anything that you look at, you can ask yourself 3 questions and come to one that you cannot answer. So all of our comfort and so James Dickey seems to take these moments, these moments from life, executioner enough to give him a reason not to kill him. And he's taken the last few moments of a life here and gave it a humorous introduction, because like I said, about the 2 pages of the poem before this paragraph where you find out his head has just been cut off, it's such a shock, because the feeling is so light and so funny as he's talking about doing these somersaults, and he's describing the wind and describing the sand and describing the birds and everything, and it just seems like this wonderful poem. And then you come to this. But it stopped me dead in my tracks, which is why I wanted to share it, because it really brought me in touch with those last few moments. How do I justify myself? If I was meeting my executioner at this moment, what is it that I could write that is uniquely mine? What is it that I could say or do? The little pieces of entertainment, you know, is it a sense of humor? Is it the fact that I can do a somersault or a handstand? Is it the fact that I'm funny, or that I'm educated, or that I'm a nice guy? What is it that I have invested my life in? And that's really the question I wanted to bring to you. What is it that you've invested your life in? If at this moment someone stood before you as an executioner, how would you justify your existence? What do you think of yourself? And it brings to a light a lot of things that we never consider, that we never take a look at. And it takes you very deep into yourself. So I found a great deal of value in his approach. This next poem is very much along the same lines. It says, the central impulse of Dickey's poetry may be said to be that of identifying with human or other creatures in moments of ultimate confrontation, of violence and truth, where no pretense is allowed. And this next poem that he wrote, I had the whole poem, and I was going to force you through the whole poem until I realized it would take me almost 25 minutes to just read it. So I took out selections from it. It's called Falling. And an article in the New York Times inspired him. And here you have the little heading to the article. A 29-year-old stewardess fell to her death tonight when she was swept through an emergency door. Somebody to mute. Go, Paul, you need to mute.
Yeah, I'm trying.
The button down in the bottom left of your window. All right. A 29-year-old stewardess fell to her death tonight when she was swept through an emergency door that suddenly sprang open. The body was found 3 hours after the accident. So this woman, we'll read it here in the first one of the first stanzas of the poem. Now, this poem, I really wrestled because I thought, gosh, this is dark. Swami wanted to do this. But, Swami Vivekananda makes the statement that one should think of death every day. And he says that at first it is a rather macabre experience. He said, until you begin to reap some of the fruit of thinking that way and allow it to enrich your life, because it's the boundaries of life that give beauty its beauty, that give inspiration its depth, that gives love its importance, that it's the temporariness of things that make us pay attention, that bring it to light and cast the stage lights on the subject. And so it's in that spirit that I chose these poems, not to be macabre or whatnot, but to take a look at life in its last few moments, to come to an understanding of exactly what is it that is beautiful? What is it that was meaningful? What is it in our life that we are clinging so desperately to, that we hate to see it pass, or that we can't bear to think of its ending? So I'm going to read through these and then make some comments. And if anybody has particular comments about particular stanzas, feel free. These are not complete. I just went through and grabbed a few of the more descript ones in this interesting adventure. The states, when they black out and lie there rolling, when they turn to something transcontinental, move by, drawing moonlight out of the great one-sided stone hung off the starboard wingtip. Some sleeper next to an engine is groaning for coffee, and there is faintly coming in somewhere the vast beast whistle of space. In the galley with its racks of trays, she rummages for a blanket and moves in her slim tailored uniform to pin it over the cry at the top of the door, as though she blew the door down with a silent blast from her lungs. Frozen, she is black out finding herself, with the plane nowhere, and her body taken by the throat, the undying cry of the void, falling, living, beginning to be something that no one has ever been and lived through, screaming without enough air, still neat, lipsticked, stockinged, girdled by regulation, her hat still on her arms and legs in no world, and yet spaced also strangely with utter placid rightness on thin air. Taking her time, she holds it in many places, and now, still thousands of feet from her death, she seems to slow, she develops interest, she turns in her maneuverable body. So here we've got the first moment, the first minute. In the very first stanza, the scene is her in the galley of the plane. The person over by the wing looking out at the moon wants a cup of coffee. She hears a terrible whistling coming from the emergency door. She rummages for a blanket presumably to try and stop the noise. And as she approaches the door to put the blanket up over this leak of air, the door blows open, and our unfortunate or fortunate stewardess is sucked out into the night sky, 30,000 feet above the central United States, which she refers to in several instances on her way down. So she's falling. She's doing something that has never been done before. The first reaction, of course, is the startled scream, and the air is super thin. She's 30,000 feet in the air. And the first description that we have is that nothing has really changed in her immediate self. She's still lipsticked and stockinged and girdled by regulation, and that her hat's still on her arms and her legs in no world. She's in an in-between space, that is very unique, a situation that she mentions no one has ever been in before. And one of them now is she has become interested. She's fascinated with her situation. It's clearly too much to comprehend, too much to think about, too much to really understand. And so you're going to get a lot of jumping from one idea to the next idea, one set of thoughts to the next set of thoughts. And the fascination of it for me was being there, putting myself in that situation. What in the world? And the fact that here a poet would find the inspiration to write a poem, a very long poem, about a fall, coming down from a marvelous leap with the delaying, dumbfounding ease of a dream of being drawn, like endless moonlight to the harvest soil, of a central state of one's country, with a great gradual warmth coming over her, floating, finding more and more breath in what she has been using for breath as the levels become more human, seeing clouds placed honestly below her left and right, riding slowly toward them. She clasps it all to her and can hang her hands and feet in it in peculiar ways, and her eyes opened wide by wind can open her mouth as wide, wider, and suck all the heat from the cornfields, can go down on her back with a feeling of stupendous pillows stacked under her, and can turn as to someone in bed, smile, understood in darkness, can go away, slant, slide, off tumbling into the emblem of a bird with its wings half spread, or whirl madly on herself in endless gymnastics in the growing warmth of wheat fields rising toward the harvest moon. This beautiful, a couple of very beautiful things in there, like the endless moonlight to the harvest soil, the dream of being drawn like the moonlight. I mean, it's such a romantic vision because when you're between the two endpoints, he's bringing out the beauty of the experience. If just these last few moments of life, you can sit there and think about dying, of the dread of hitting the ground. Just like we have that same choice, we are exactly between these same 2 points that our stewardess is in between, that point of birth and that point of death. And that really doesn't matter if that stretch of time is 90 years, 5 minutes, 45 seconds. Does it really matter where the endpoints are? He's writing about the experience in between these two endpoints and the fact that she only has moments or minutes of experience puts such a power and such an energy into the quality of thinking, into the depth of understanding, into the rummaging through experience. And I really wanted to take that into myself, that sense of life that she must have felt between those two endpoints. Why should I live any duller of a few moments than she is living between those same endpoints for myself? Why should I consider any less the importance of a moment to me than the importance of the moment to her? Why should I wonder any less in my moments about the meaning, about the beauty, about the purpose, about what am I? What can I do? How can I express myself? How does my body move? How does my mind move? How does the air feel on my face? How does the moon strike my eyes? This richness that she's pulling in, this understanding of perspective, I found very inspiring and very interesting to look at. The way that she describes herself able to madly whirl or to relax when she looks up at the sky and not at the approaching earth below. How she can be in bed in ultimate comfort, tossing and turning, or she can turn in endless gymnastics. She's feeling herself being able to breathe more and more as the atmosphere thickens, as she falls. And then at below, of the wheat fields rising toward the harvest moon. We often talk about the moon rising, and here it's the wheat fields rising up to this harvest moon. A very different perspective, shared in a very different way, but noticed nonetheless. There is time to live. That's the promise. She hasn't hit the ground yet. You haven't died yet. The boundary of our life has not approached. There is time to live in superhuman health, seeing mortal, unreachable lights far down, seeing an ultimate highway with one late, priceless car probing it, arriving in a square town, and off her starboard arm the glitter of water catches the moon by its one shaken side, scaled, roaming silver. My God, it is good and evil, lying in one after another of all the positions for love making, dancing, sleeping, and now cloud wisps at her no raincoat, no matter. all small towns brokenly brighter from inside cloud. She walks over them like rain, bursts out to behold a Greyhound bus shooting light through its sides. It is the signal to go straight down like a glorious diver. Again, this change in perspective, the way that she talks about the importance of things, the ultimate highway that she can see from one end to the other, perhaps a metaphor for the fact that she can see her life at this moment from one end to the other, from that door to the ground. And with one priceless car probing it, that priceless car in mid-fall, that one destination, that one trip along that highway of living, arriving in a square town, and then she catches the water by the moon shaken on one side, scaled, roaming silver. She sees the good and the evil of it all, the beauty and the horror of what she's looking at, to see this amazing vista of being alive, and yet its impermanence is so immediate, so much in front of her, that she doesn't know how to take these two extremes of life and to reconcile them, to put them together in the small time that she has. It's a description, isn't it, really, of what life is in its richness, in its fullness. How do we make sense of this experience of being that has this seeming boundary to us? To take a look at the beauty of this life and the horror of this life, and to somehow inhabit a moment that is always in between them, that is always being torn by them, to try and pull meaning like she does out of an old Greyhound bus that has light shooting out from its windows, and seeing that as her signal to dive straight down like a glorious diver, to make a grand acceptance. I'm going. This is it. Throw away the fear. What is the purpose and point of the fear? She starts out, this stanza starts out, there is time to live. There is time to be alive in superhuman health. The acceptance of death, the acceptance, the adrenaline run of open arming yourself to life, to whatever it brings, just taking it on the chin, fearlessly to live, to be alive, to be full, and to dive straight into it without any hesitation or remorse or fear. Into another heavy silver, unbreathable, slowing, saving element, there is water. There is time to perfect all the fine points of diving, feet together, toes pointed, hands shaped right, to insert her into water like a needle, to come out healthily dripping and be handed a Coca-Cola. There they are. There are the waters of life, the moon packed and coiled in a reservoir. So let me begin. She sees water and she's thinking, oh, it's unlikely 30,000 foot dive that I would survive, but it's all of the hope that she has. Everything. If I can land in water, if I can perfect a dive, if I can straighten my body, needle straight into the water and go. And it's us, finding some means. How do we confront death? How do we confront the end? What can we do? What can be done? For many people may turn to religion as their water. If I can learn to point my toes and dive and fall miraculously in and be saved from this ending, or attempt to make sense of these things. And there, this water, and be handing something as mundane as a Coca-Cola, what is that? To be handed a Coca-Cola, it's that really the pricelessness of the mundane. how rich you must be to be able to see a moment of life as mundane. That statement that here she's fallen and she can think about how precious that was, to know, to be able in ignorance, in delusion, to think that life was so abundant that you could actually be bored, that you could actually afford to take something and not see its brilliance, not see its importance. So her here taking that if she survived and comes up from the water, that once again she could take a Coke bottle in its urbane state, not see the preciousness of that, not be touched by that preciousness. And so here she's falling toward the sea, and she gets discombobulated here in this one, to give a little bit of a segue. Do something with water, fly to it, fall in it, drink it, rise from it. But there is none left upon the earth. The clouds have drunk it back. The plants have sucked it down. There are standing toward her only the common fields of death. She comes back from flying to falling. How hope has changed the nature, changed the experience of falling into flying, thinking that there was something that would save her at the end. Let her now take off her hat in summer air, the contour of cornfields, and have enough time to kick off her one remaining shoe with the toes of the other foot, to unhook her stockings with calm fingers, noting how fatally easy it is to undress in midair, near death, when the body will assume without effort any position except the one that will sustain it, enable it to rise, live. You know, it's very interesting. I wasn't sure I was going to include this section, because actually in the stanzas that follow us, he has her stripped completely naked. And I thought to myself, my gosh, how gratuitous that was. But then I thought, absolutely not. Because she's taking off her identity. Because what is she wearing? She's wearing a stewardess's outfit, girdled by regulation, as we started. Her high heels that she had to work in, one already missing. She begins to take off these limitations of who she is, begins to remove the constraints. She's free after all. She sees the end. She sees the brevity. And there is no regulation. There is no requirement. She comes into that detachment, comes into the understanding of discernment, that this life is a life of freedom, a life of choice, that there are no important decisions for her at this moment, that it will all be absorbed and all taken in. So she takes off her hat in summer air, the contour of cornfields, and have enough time to kick off her one remaining shoe. Even knowing she's falling, you feel that comfort of removing that shoe at the end of the day, that high heel you've been tramping up and down that aisle with. And how fatally easy it is to undress in midair near death, when the body will assume without effort any position except the one that will sustain it, enable it to rise, to live. This is a moment that all of us share. This is the one thing that all of us can hold and look at and know that all of us will have that experience. That moment when we let go, that moment when the identity is finished, when the regulation is finished, when the restraints are done, when the rest is promised, and the letting go is the only thing left to do. That moment when there is nothing else, no other concern, that nothing can sustain, nothing can enable it to rise, nothing will continue the story that we're experiencing at the moment. All the known air above her is not giving up quite one breath. It is all gone, and yet not anywhere else, quite lying still in the field on her back, sensing the smells of incessant growth try to lift her. A little sight left in the corner of one eye, fading, seeing something wave, lies believing that she could have made it. At the best part of her brief goddess state, to water, gone in head first, come out smiling, invulnerable. So here we have, he graciously gives her a moment in stillness, as the few stanzas before this really go into quite a description as her body is embraced, as the earth rushes up like a cloud to give her rest. And, you know, now he gives her those few moments as life is seeping out, just a little bit of vision left in the corner of one eye, you know, not giving up quite one breath. It's all gone. It's finished. This He spends almost as many stanzas with this last one moment as he did with the rest of the fall. And he brings all of life into this, the farmer that runs out, runs out toward her, not knowing, not understanding, unable to explain, as he runs to the same fate that she is experiencing, she says. So this how she draws in the whole world into this one experience, that this is our unified experience. And as she lies there with the light fading from her eyes, believing still that she could have made it. This incessant clinging to life that Vivekananda talks about, this holding on to our identity, not wanting to release into the universal, not wanting to expand into a wholeness, into a oneness, but holding on to that this moment, this sense of being. Lies in the fields, in this field, on her broken back, as though on a cloud she cannot drop through, while farmers sleepwalk without their women from houses, a walk like falling toward the far waters of life, in moonlight, toward the dreamed eternal meaning of their farms, toward the flowering of the harvest in their hands. That tragic cost feels herself go toward, go outward, breathes at last fully, not, and tries, less, once, tries. Ah, God. And it ends. It ends with her showing us and telling us what she's learned. That she says that all of you sleepwalk without your women from your houses, a walk like falling toward the far waters, thinking that you're going to be saved, thinking that death will not approach you. We live life completely not anticipating that reality. We don't keep it in our minds. We don't contemplate it. It's always something we put away. And she says, there they are, the farmers sleepwalking from their houses, a walk like falling toward the far waters of life, in moonlight, not well lit, mystery, darkness and ignorance everywhere around us, toward the dreamed eternal meaning of their farms, that dreamed importance of our life, the dreamed infinity that we assume is before us, or that it feels like that we shall live forever. On the light side, Swami Prabhupada says we feel that way because we know that way. We have never experienced death. It is impossible for us to imagine ourselves dead. He says we bring that into the world with us because we are, in fact, immortal. That's why we sense that. That's why it's so difficult to understand or to see or even to imagine. We cannot imagine non-existence. The best we can do is to think of rest, of a good sleep. Non-existence is something that we cannot conceive of because it is something beyond us, something not us. So here she's bringing all that in toward the dreamed eternal meaning of their farms, toward the flowering of the harvest in their hands, that tragic cost. Feels herself go toward, go outward, breathes at last fully, not, and tries, less, once, tries. Ah, God. Those final two words, the surrender, the letting go, the acceptance. This is. And I think that in that is, again, it really depends on our state of mind. Is that macabre or is that infinitely beautiful? Is it a horror or is it an infinite rest? Is it a life well investigated, lived consciously, lived and appreciated in its moments, knowing they were numbered, knowing that they were rich, knowing that they were each one wonderful, no matter how mundane they seemed. The fact that they were limited gives us that importance, that beauty, that richness. And I see in this poem and wanted to share that with you, that that's the point of this poem, to give you back your life, to give you back the richness of the moment, to wake you up from the assumption that you've got infinite moments of this, so that each one takes on its specialness, takes on its depth. It reminds me in college, I took a theater class my last semester of school. I might have shared this story before. It's really one of the pivotal stories of my life that really, really changed the way I live. In this class, it was the first week of class, one of the first exercises that we did, and the teacher paired us all up. So we each were standing in front of a stranger that we had never met, that we did not know. And we were standing toe to toe with about 6 inches between our noses, 6 to 8 inches, very close. And he said, I want you to stand there gazing into each other's eyes. Do not break eye contact. You cannot touch each other. You cannot talk to each other. And your feet cannot move from their position. Anything else is okay. And he dimmed the lights in the room, and we stood there staring 8 inches from the face of a stranger, holding eye contact for the entire time. And we stood there for about 10 or 15 minutes, which seemed like forever. Some people were crying. Some people were laughing. Some people were just standing there silently and staring. I myself felt like I had fallen into the person in front of me, that I had somehow given up a barrier, given up a protectiveness. And after we'd been standing there for almost 15 minutes, he took a stick and smacked it on the wall. So it made this echoing crack through the room. Startled us, but we didn't break our eye contact. Again, bang. Again, bang. 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 And after he had done that 6 or 7 times, he said, every time I bang the wall with this stick, a moment of your life is gone. You will never have it back. You will never be able to try it again. You will never be able to change what you've spent it on. And he went on from there to describe how the moment is the only tool of the actor, and how you should take that moment, give it its shape, and throw it out to the audience. That was his lesson. I went into therapy. I left that class. It was my last class of the day, and I was walking to the bus stop, and I felt this incredible sense of panic inside as I really envisioned my life running through my fingers like water, that I couldn't stop it. I couldn't stop its flow. I couldn't preserve it. I couldn't hold on to it. It was going, 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 going. And there I was spending it by walking to a bus stop. I was like, I can't spend my life on walking to a bus stop. I can't stand spending my life sitting on a bus waiting to get home. It's like every moment was striking me as being infinitely expensive, and I couldn't afford to spend even a moment of it. And yet there it was, going, 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 going. And I had lived differently ever since that experience. It's what ended up putting me in the monastery. Not many months after that, I had quit my job and had started walking around the world literally for a year, trying to find something meaningful, trying to find something that was worth this life, this present moment. And I liked this poem and wanted to share it today because of that idea, because of that perspective, that we might as well have fallen out of a plane toward the earth for the amount of time that we have left. And in that understanding, make sure that we spend our life in a rich and meaningful, a gratuitous and happy way, in whatever that may mean to us in our exploration. But like her, to see the harvest moon and the beauty of the fields and the warming of the air and the filling of our lungs, to throw off our limitations, our restrictions, the things that tie us down, the burdens that make it heavy, to throw those off and know that none of it matters at that level, that there's something in poetry, there's something in art, there's something in the spirit, in the poet that lies inside of us that has to come out, that has to sing its song, that we can drink a Coca-Cola in a very different way. All right, so that was our first third there. That was our first poet, our James Dickey from Atlanta, Georgia. Now the second poet, artist here, Georgia O'Keeffe, probably many people have heard of her. She's one of the most significant artists of the 20th century, renowned for her contribution to modern art. She was born in 1887, so she's sort of a contemporary. She lives well into our generation. The second of 7 children, Georgia Cato O'Keeffe, grew up on a farm near Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. Now, why did I put that in there? Because here's a woman who we remember and who is considered one of the renowned artists of our time, born in a podunk town of no import in the middle of Wisconsin. Now, how many of us can be born in a place like that and come to international acclaim? There's quite a talent here. And our previous artist was from Atlanta, Georgia, also from South, not a small town, but also from the South, you know, some humbler beginnings. Now, Arthur Wesley Doubt, he was a friend of hers who lived in New York City, and he encouraged an intellectual and imaginative process of making art that was grounded in personal expression and harmonious design. And she says of him, this man had one dominating idea. Now, if you've been watching my vlogs, that was one of my topics about 3 days ago. That article, that talk that Swami Vivekananda gives, where he says, take a single idea and live that one idea. Spend your entire life pondering it, poking at it, understanding it, exploring it, experimenting with it. He says, if you are able to do this with one pointedness for 6 months, you will become a perfected yogi, he says. That idea of that single focus, that single-mindedness, and interestingly enough, in that same vlog, if you were watched it, I was inspired to that thinking by a young man who's an artist in Australia, and he was working as an assistant to a rather famous artist. And that artist, he asked that artist, he said, how do I become a great artist? What should I do as an artist? And that artist told him, draw the exact same thing every single day. And he thought that was the weirdest advice ever, but he started doing it. And he chose a bird unique to Australia as his subject. And he drew that same bird every day. And he would change the backgrounds, change the positioning, change the whatnots about it. And then he started putting little thought bubbles next to that bird. And then he started writing things and putting the bird in these different positions and different exclamations. And he said, that's I found my passion. He said, by experimenting with the idea of constraint, I found a freedom. He said, I found that really what I was interested in was in social commentary, in art, through my art. And he said, I just began exploring that and pushing all of my energy into that. He said, I just found my passion. So when I read this little bit about this artist, I was immediately like, wow, there it is again. You know, this man had one dominating idea, according to O'Keeffe, to fill a space in a beautiful way. And that interested me. Now there, look at that. That is such a simple idea. Fill a space in a beautiful way. That's a little piece of life right there that you can take as your one idea. And as you're plummeting toward the earth in your final moments of this life, take that as your passion to fill a space in a beautiful way. What a wonderful call to life. And look what it did for this small town girl from the middle of nowhere, I might say. Whether you succeed or not is irrelevant. There is no such thing. That's the throwing off your girdle of regulation. Whether you succeed or not is irrelevant. There is no such thing. This idea of success, what is it? It's imagined. It's imagined. It's put upon you. Making your unknown known is the important thing. Explore that which is beyond your fingertips. Explore the mystery. Poke into the wonder of being. See what is there. You know, her focus, that it changes as her life goes on, but initially she paints these amazing flowers, like this one called White Rose, painted in 1927. She zooms in on the rose, a rose just before you smell it. The perspective when it takes your entire frame of reference to put your face into that rose. and gives you what here? Something so beautiful. You can see the ideas of Mother Nature there. You can see the feminine lines, the softness of acceptance, of repose, of expressed beauty, of a real gentleness in that. This is her filling a space with beauty, with something beautiful, that very center of the rose that she finds beautiful. I realized I had things in my head, not like what I had been taught, not like what I had seen, shapes and ideas so familiar to me that it hadn't occurred to me to put them down. I decided to stop painting, to put away everything I had done, and to start to say the things that were my own. You see, here she's harping back to the ideas of what our previous poet was saying. Write that one thing that only you can write. What is it in your experience of living that has been so constant for you, that has been so stable for you, that you no longer see it, that you no longer know it? And this is the entire point of spiritual living, to touch that divinity in us, that unchanging self, the Upanishads say, that part of you that never changes, whose nature is intelligence, that which allows you to see and to wonder and to view this unknown wonder of being, that sense of love that allows you to see beauty, that allows you to create beauty, that allows you to relate, that allows you to touch somebody, to share, to empathize, to be with somebody in a meaningful way. That part of you that is always present, always expressing. Go and find that part of you, those shapes, those ideas so familiar that it has never occurred to you to see them, to express them, to let them out. And stop painting, stop your doing, start your mad living, stop your mad living of just frenetically doing, getting things done, appointments and bills and schedules and things that have to get there. I decided to stop painting, to put away everything that I had done, and to start to say the things that were my very own. This is spiritual life. This is the life of an artist, that artist that our James Dickey has told us lives in every one of us, that it's up to us to accept that and then to contrive a means of expressing it so that we can write that line that only we can write. In the summer of 1929, O'Keeffe made the first of many trips to northern New Mexico. For the next 2 decades, she spent part of most years living and working in New Mexico. The stark landscape, the distinct indigenous art, and the unique regional style of adobe architecture inspired a new direction in O'Keeffe's artwork. You see, I liked the fact that by being aware, by opening up, by stopping everything and opening all the doors of yourself, that you can take in this beauty, and it will mix with this unchanging self. And in your art of living, your art of life, you can create something unique. You can see here this ladder that this is a photo that she took. How different that is from the white rose, and yet how beautiful, how utterly different, and yet not, in its subtlety, its stillness. I found it very fascinating with her, when she paints things of nature, mountains or water or skies or hills, as you'll see in some of these other works. It's always very, very feminine, very, very, very soft, very, very non-defined shape. And when she paints things man-made, whether they're houses or adobe gardens or a ladder here, they're always extremely geometrical, hard lines, very masculine. And how she takes those two ideas of masculine and feminine and finds their place, in the world. It's really quite interesting, and how she feels about each one of them. This back of Marie's, so you can see her sitting in the backyard of her friend Marie's house. Probably thousands of people have seen what she's looking at, and who noticed it, who was able to capture how beautiful it was to sit in Marie's backyard in 1931 and to share with those clouds peeping over the edge of this defined, beautiful forefront, you know, the infinite just suggesting itself, just holding its space as it puts in front of you the limited, the shaped, the formed there, and how that form starts so ominous, dark, big, tall, overbearing, and slowly through the use of color and undulating edges, she brings it to you in the soft spring green of the trees, takes away the threat, the ominence, the domination, and presents it finally to you in this smooth layer of just a tranquil, teal, gray teal line at the bottom of the painting. You know, so many levels of interaction with what we see and what we look with, and how we feel and how we're approached in all of that. I had an experience back, 1994, I think it was. I took an outrageously long hike on the South Island of New Zealand, up through some of their alpine mountains there. Beautiful, unbelievably beautiful hike. My problem was that I didn't prepare for that hike at all. I had like 2 bottles of water with me, no food, and it was a 3-day hike. We started late afternoon. We made it to the first hut, spent the night, got up, hiked the entire next day to another hut, slept the night, and then hiked half a day the last day. Now, I got separated from my group and was hiking alone on this trail. And I remember that last day, I was out of water. I was out of food. I had been walking more than I had ever walked. I was so tired. And I was walking through this forest that was so beautiful. And I thought I was going to die. I literally thought that I was going to die. I thought, I'm going to die in this incredibly beautiful forest. And I remember how it struck me that a forest can be so deadly and so beautiful at the same time, that it could be so threatening and be my grave, and at the same time be strikingly beautiful. And that's the idea that I like being presented in these forms today, in these ideas. So here, the ominous desert, the hugeness, the vastness of the infinity beyond, and yet somehow softening by the time it meets you. So you can see the beauty, you can see the wonder, you know, and not, not see it as the grave. Again, here, you see these hard geometric lines. This is her idea of the maleness, I think, in made things, when we bend nature to our will. You know, so you can see in the feminine, the surrender, the harmony, the relaxing into it all. And whenever she does the man-made structures, you know, these hard angles, these absolute geometric lines, this is the making the will, the manifesting of the will. So all of these paintings are in a succession of the times that they were painted in. So you can see her development. Canyon 2, 1965, the year I was born. So again, she's kind of reducing it. This time this is a little bit of a mixture. You know, 1965, she's been painting for a long time. She started out with the very soft flowers, moved into the very geometric period of man-made structures and some of the indigenous arts of New Mexico. And now she's sort of marrying the two. You can see here that she's taken those lines of nature and made them a little bit more distinct, a little bit more absolute, and yet she's not making them angular, you know, as such. Everything's got a softer edge, but she is, you see her merging her two ideals, that she's not keeping them so far apart anymore at this point. At the age of 73, now this is why I put her in here. This was amazing to me. So many of us think, oh my gosh, 73. You know, of course, I'm 56 now. I think of 73, I'm like, well, you know, by then I'll just be sitting down, finding my Jeopardy channel and coasting out the few days I have left. But not this woman here. At the age of 73, she took on a new subject, aerial views of clouds and the sky. So she's reinventing herself at 73. So here is her aerial view. Now I thought that was interesting, kind of circles back to our poem. This is something that our stewardess might have painted in a quick moment on her way down. And again, you see her marrying those two extremes, taking clouds and presenting them in more of an organized geometric fashion. But she still keeps that infinity at the horizon. She keeps that softness of the horizon as you look there. But I liked how she brought them together. Here is Blue Wave in Maine. So again, you see her experimenting, bringing some softness and some line. This time she's marrying the ground with the sky, making them indistinguishable expressions of the same infinity, as it were, but always very gentle, always very soft and approachable, very beautiful. The Beyond, 1972. Suffering from macular degeneration and failing vision, O'Keeffe painted her last unassisted oil painting in 1972. So she goes almost blind and still paints for almost another 20 years. This is her last painting that she painted by herself without any assistance. And again, you see the absolute now, that she has brought together her opposites into a single painting. All of the soft, flowy edges and all of the masculine hard lines of will married together in a painting. And again, still putting in the middle of it all that soft infinity, that inviting forever, that just sits behind everything we ever look at. Quite stunning. I sat and just stared at this and thought, wow, that's the last painting that she did by herself. How amazingly beautiful. But wait till you see one of the last paintings that she does. Absolutely stunning. There it is. O'Keeffe's will to create did not diminish with her eyesight. In 1977, at age 90, she observed, "I can see what I want to paint. The thing that makes you want to create is still there." Late in life and almost blind, she enlisted the help of several assistants to enable her to continue creating art. In these works, she drew on favorite motifs from memory and her vivid imagination. And puts it together. This one was striking to me at how much it resembles some of the art that we started out with, the old Japanese artists. And that circle of realization is actually being mirrored here. And the simplicity of nature as kind of a draped front to this goal of life, this goal of realization suspended in the back behind it all. And now her dividing line of infinity is this very faint little charcoal line across the bottom of the picture. Because at 90, that separate horizon of forever is not so distinct. Life and death are very close together at that point. And that infinity is touchable. And the things covering it are no longer big mountains and close-up flowers, but the delicate tendrils of a pine tree. I just looked at that monochrome, painting, because color's gone. Her eyesight is almost completely gone at this point. So it's only suggestion left. And yet, in all of that, she still has that infinity within her that's expressing through any means she has available to her. And that's the nature of living. That's the nature of living, is that though the body diminishes, though the senses diminish, that life within us is always strong. That sense of being is unchanging. We are always that same sense looking out. And that to live and to be alive means using whatever is at your hand, no matter how limited your body becomes, no matter how limited your eyesight becomes, no matter your senses shut down, to not fight those limitations, but to shine through those limitations. Remember last month I shared about my friend Alita, who was that powerful lawyer, very self-determined Jewish woman, and she had that devastating stroke. And it took her a year to adjust. The first part of that year was dark for her. She couldn't even roll herself over in bed. She couldn't dress herself. And she always had prided herself on her independence and her strength. And at the end of the year, she called me, and I could hear the difference in her voice. And she said, "I've understood. I have found that unchanging me, that still is wonderful and still is alive and is still independent. And she says, I've learned to push it through a broken body, to reach the world outside of a broken body, undeterred. She says, I feel like I've gotten my life back. And I see that in this painting here, that no longer the flaring colors, the hard lines. No, now it's this gentle sense of the unchanging being within, expressing itself in a very mild, monochrome, and yet infinitely beautiful and aesthetically wonderful way. And I just thought that is what we come to realize. You know, as we sit there 90 years old, 90 plus years old, I can see what I want to paint. The thing that makes you want to create is still there. That immortal self is still there, always expressing, always reaching out. All right. I want to close with one more artist. Oh, it's past time. We'll go quickly. George Inness, an American landscape painter. And just some beautiful thing. The use of art is first to cultivate the artist's own spiritual nature. Excuse me. That's why I chose him. His art was used primarily for him to develop his own spiritual insight, his own spiritual feeling in his life. And wait till you see some of these. He was influenced in turn by the old masters, the old Dutch masters they're talking about, and their wonderful use of light. If you go down to the National Gallery, they have a wonderful collection of old masters, the Dutch masters' art, and everything has that internal glow to it. So he uses that lighting from the Dutch masters. The Hudson River School, which I was just up in the Hudson Valley, a year ago, 2 years ago now, I don't know, up at Holy Cross Monastery, right in the middle. I went to Vassar College and looked at their gallery, and they had a whole bunch of paintings of the Hudson Valley Art School. Because it's so far north, the lighting comes in at a very hard angle on the terrain, and the hills are all very rolling and very with these wonderful slate cliffs and the Hudson River rolling through the middle of it all. And a whole school of painting developed there, landscape painting. And the Barbizon School, of course, we know Barbizon, that's near Fontainebleau. That's where the Monet started, where the Impressionists started their ideas. So that soft edges, almost expressionistic painting that comes a little bit later. And finally, the theology of Emanuel Swedenborg, whose spiritualism found vivid expression in the work of Inness's maturity. So a lot of talk about the world that hides behind this one. And we'll see that in his work. Inness was a transitional figure who intended for his works to combine both the earthly and the ethereal in order to capture the complete essence of a locale, of a place. So you do find, like in these next couple of examples, you look at that picture, you can almost feel it in more ways than just visually. You can almost smell the air. You can almost feel the temperature. You can sense what it was, what the whole experience of being there was for him. You'll find it interesting in all of his paintings that there's always an implied solitude. There's always an implied stillness in it. No matter what kind of thing is being portrayed, it's as if behind it all is this infinite stillness, this infinite quiet of being. Lake Albano in 1869. A master of light, color, and shadow, he became noted for creating highly ordered and complex scenes that often juxtaposed hazy or blurred elements with sharp and refined details to evoke an interweaving of both the physical and the spiritual nature of experience. Yeah. So the hardness of the senses and yet the softness of mind behind it. You see that here in Home, Montclair, 1892. Just here and there, a spot of something very particular, the bird in the snow, the white on the railing of the fence, and yet the general softness of the picture, the blackened tree in one space holding that kind of undefined, spiritual self, and then in some of the other trees, even the smallest branches are perceived, are seeable, distinguished, and all of it kind of again lost in those two infinites, that white empty snow in the front and that infinite sky in the back, and sort of our existence in between the two, very common in his pictures. Here another one, exactly the same, in undefined qualities and very distinct qualities, mixed in that lighting, from the Dutch masters, that technique, and our solitary figure under the tree there. Quite often there's only one person or one bird or one animal that's hidden somewhere in the picture. There's always a sense of the longer you look, the more you move into his spaces. There really is a revealed mystery in each one of them that you don't see it at first, and as you sit there looking at it, you notice, oh, look at that. Oh, wow, look at that. More and more comes to you, and you realize that in a very simple composition, he has put in an amazing amount of information, an amazing amount of experience. The Storm, 1885. The Sisters in the Garden, 1882. This one was just a weird painting to me. One, because a picture of people usually spends a lot of time putting detail of their face in there, like this. These are definite people, and he doesn't. Their faces are actually in shadow. Really, what you notice more than anything is one, their postures. That one sister is literally holding up the other sister, and the flower in the hand of the sister in the foreground. That's one of the most detailed things in a picture that doesn't have much detail, along with the tree behind her that's leaning at the exact same angle that she is. So it's implying she's the strength in this family. She's the one holding things up. The watering can in the background. Anyway, I thought it tells an awful lot of a story. It gives you a lot of information that you can play with, again, as you just kind of fall into his work. And the lighting of the sky behind it, so bright, and the dark foreground. That's the reverse of how most painters painted. In Inness's words, he attempted through his art to demonstrate the reality of the unseen and to connect with the visible upon the invisible. So again, marrying the finite with the infinite, which is our experience of living, isn't it? We live somehow dangling between the two, a very well-defined foreground around us all the time, and yet the infinity of space surrounding that at all the time. And our awareness of kind of both at the same time, our senses and body giving us a very positional, very exacting experience of life, and yet an inner world of wonder, an inner world of mystery that seems to go on forever, that can interpret everything in 1,000 different ways. So we're always suspended between two infinities, as it were. And he tries to exert that in these paintings. Here, two infinities coming together again, the ocean and the sky, and suspended between the two, the bird. The hint even there in the background, even there's a cliff hanging there in the background. So even in the midst of all this no form, there's a reminder of form, a reminder of definition in there. You can see a lot in there. The sunset, sunrise, you don't know. The freedom of the birds, the anger of the waves, the destruction, and yet the stillness and beauty of the sky. Quite something. This one here. How long until you see the little boy with the stick in his hand watching the sunrise in the woods? 1887, how long do you have to look before you see the animals and the flowers? And that sense again of the infinite shining through the finite, giving that sense of invitation and mystery, kind of wanting you to just sit there and wonder. Something about that picture, that painting, makes you wonder. And this one, watching the sun glow, 1879. How long before you see your companion in the picture enjoying the same glowing sun? And again, the hint of details here and there, the light striking the pieces of wood, and yet large portions of no detail, no form at all. So again, that formless infinity kind of enveloping a defined limitation and restriction. you know, inviting you like the stewardess to throw it off on your way down. Be free, fall into it.